Okay. Hi everyone, my name is Eddie. I am a success engineer with DreamFactory. And today I'm going to walk you through how easy it is to create and restify a MySQL database. So first and foremost, let me share my screen. Here we are on the admin dashboard. This is where you'll find all the services that are created. You can test your endpoints as well. And I will walk you through some articulating services once we create our MySQL API. So first and foremost, from your admin dashboard, you're going to click on the Services tab, navigate to the Create button here. And on the service type dropdown, you're just going to hover over Database and select MySQL. For the sake of this demonstration, I'm just going to call this MySQL data. Be very mindful of the namespace field, as it does serve as part of your request URI structure. So you want to avoid capitalizing letters. I usually don't put numbers or spaces. Just a one-word string like that is fine. Here on label and description, on the other hand, those are just for information purposes. So I'm just going to put testing on both. The only thing that you need to do on this tab before proceeding to the config tab is just making sure that the active radio is checked, and you click on next. Now this is pretty uniform, this config tab, for most of the services that are in DreamFactory, most especially for the relational database native connectors that you can use. Here I have a MySQL database that's just on my local host. So for my host, I'm just going to put in 127.0.0.1. The default port for MySQL is 3306. My database name, my username, and that's it. Those are the only required fields that you need to complete this form before testing your database connection. You can scroll all the way down to the bottom. I will mention that there are other optional fields, like schema, character set. Again, this is just predicated on how your data is structured and what you'd want to add on to this field. But the only required fields, like I mentioned earlier, are these fields here. You click on Save and give it a little moment. Now, I really do want to point out this little alert here. The service is saved successfully in seconds of just creating the service. We have already restified my MySQL database. So I want to put a lot of emphasis on how quick that happens prior to going to this API docs tab to test that. What this represents is months of time creating a REST API from a MySQL database or any really relational database. So that's pretty cool. Now, like I said, to test this, we go to the API docs tab, scroll down a tad bit, and you'll see my newly created MySQL API. All of these endpoints, these service definitions, are live. So say, for instance, you ran a like a delete or a put or a post or a patch. This will directly influence your data. So just be mindful of that. We're simply just going to run a get on a table / table name. Scroll all the way down. These are some logical filters that you can apply to your request URL to query your data in different ways. But simply, I'm just going to put in the table name here. Click execute. And if you scroll down, you should receive a 200 code and your response body, excuse me. And that's pretty much it. In just minutes, we have created a REST API from my MySQL data. Now, in order to test this externally, I would just take this request URL and use a third-party application here, like Insomnia. You can see that I've already been running some tests. But let's go ahead and try this endpoint table, and maybe my table name is members. I'm just going to use basic authorization for now. And you'll see that I'll get the same response that I got in my DreamFactory instance. Now, additionally, What you can also do in more real world application, if you're not using basic authorization to test your endpoints, is you can use something that you can configure in DreamFactory called an API key and give it a corresponding role to your data point. So first and foremost, before testing that out, let's go ahead and create a role. By hitting this roles tab, you click on create on the left-hand side. I'm just going to go ahead and call this MySQL data. And again, just label this testing. And once again, on the roles basic info tab, you're going to want to make sure that this active radio is checked. Click on next. On the access tab, this is where you can delegate the access to your components, services within your DreamFactory instance. So you're going to click on this plus button here. Right now, this is saying all. So this is pretty much admin rights to my instance. Let's just say I want to select my MySQL data, and I will give it access to all of the endpoints. Here, you can also select which verbs you want to give access to based on this role. I'm going to go ahead and select all. I'm also going to allow scripting and save that. Now, if you navigate to the apps tab, this is where you can create an API key where you can assign the newly created role, which can then be passed to that endpoint. So you're going to click on create on the left-hand side here. Again, let's just call this MySQL data testing. Leave the active radio checked and assign that default role. Click on save. And you should see the newly created role populate here. In order to test this with Insomnia, or you could also use Postman, any third-party API testing tool, you just copy that, go back here, and navigate to the headers. You'll see that I already tested in a previous API key and a previous endpoint, but let's go ahead and just delete this value. You want to structure the API key exactly this way, x-dreamfactory-api-key. Just to make sure that we're actually testing this, let's turn off basic auth. And let's just cut this out first. Now, if I click send right now, I should get a JWT session token warning, bad request. But if I place that key in here, it should work completely fine. So we should get the response body based on the access that we've delegated with this API key. So that's just one way that we can test externally. And as you've noticed, it's incredibly quick to not only create a MySQL API, but also assign authorization through the use of API keys and roles. I did also want to point out that DreamFactory has ways to authenticate into your instance that allows you to test these endpoints based on user access. So just like the API key, we can also create users to log into DreamFactory and assign default roles. In the case of a user, if I wanted to say only give access to my MySQL data, but limit that access only to get access, or say just put or post access, I can do so by giving a user that's created in my instance that role. So when they log in, they could only access that those components of my database. Additionally, DreamFactory allows other ways of authentication outside of just our internal basic authorization through things like OAuth. We have LDAP as well. And if you scroll down a little bit further, single sign-on through Okta and SAML. So that means that DreamFactory can proxy these groups, giving an alternative way to authenticate into to your instance and assign roles to those auth groups. The other thing that I wanted to point out as well, it doesn't really stop at just creating the API. If you wanted to add additional business logic to the API, DreamFactory also supports event scripting. Now, if you wanted to throw a pre or post process hook on an endpoint, you can do that by navigating here to the scripts tab. And you should see a list of all the services that are currently configured in your DreamFactory instance. These services from user all the way up to system are just pre-configured services for your DreamFactory instance to run. And these are currently my 2 custom configured services. So let's just click on the MySQL data service that I created. And here you can see the service definition types that I can iterate an event script on. So if I was to say select table / table name like we tested earlier. And the verb that I want to target is a get. And let's just say a preprocess. So right before this endpoint is going to be called with the get endpoint. Now I can also, it will actually delegate which table that I want to put this event script on. And just like I texted earlier, I'm just going to do members. Now, if you look at the structure here, what this is actually saying is it's going to call my MySQL database and target the members table whenever there's a get call, and this pre-processed script is going to fire off. So before a get is called on this endpoint. These scripting languages that we support, Node.js, PHP, Python, and Python 3. And you would just have to select the active radio and allow script to modify a request payload, and your custom event script can then be iterated on your endpoints for MySQL. So those are just a few things that I wanted to showcase today. One, how quick it is to create a MySQL API. It takes literally only a few minutes, and also how quick it is to authenticate and secure these APIs and test them externally as well. Today, we are going to have some other talks that will cover some of our other popular connectors, including SQL Server, SFTP, Salesforce. While primarily the process is really the same, it's great to see just how easy it is to connect to these connectors and generate these APIs. Again, I appreciate you taking time to watch this today. You can find the details to start a free trial of a DreamFactory instance in the description below. Have a great day.